Hello, and welcome to the Strategic Storytelling Podcast, the podcast where you'll learn to communicate like a pro by leveraging the power of stories. I'm your host, Cesar Castro, and I can't even explain how excited I am that you're here with me today in this first ever, it's a historic moment, first ever episode of this podcast. Now, just so you have a little bit of context, I'm actually not new to the podcasting world. I've been podcasting for about 3 years, creating content around public speaking, around strategic storytelling. I actually have a podcast in Spanish that's called Storytelling Estratégico, or Strategic Storytelling translation. And in 3 years, it has hundreds of thousands of downloads, thousands of people that listen to it regularly. It's one of the top business and educational podcasts in Spanish. And I think it's time. I think it's just time to start creating all this content in English to help the business leaders and professionals and entrepreneurs to develop what I think is the most important skill, which is storytelling. And I'm going to actually, let you know why. The idea of this first episode is actually to answer one question, which is why? Why should you learn storytelling? Why is it an important skill for you to develop? And I want to answer this question from two different angles. One is more of a personal angle, and the other is more of a business professional angle. And since it is the first episode and we're just getting to know each other, I want to start out with the personal angle. Because when it comes to communication, when it comes to public speaking, when it comes to storytelling, it's not something that I've always been good at. I just want to be very upfront and sincere with you. It's not something that I was born with. It's not some special gift. Actually, as a child, I was scared. I was terrified to speak in public. And I still remember when I was about 7, 8 years old, my parents, they made a drastic decision, which was go from Chile, which is where I'm originally from in South America, and we moved here to the United States. And the first few months were extremely difficult because I didn't speak a lick of English. I didn't understand and I couldn't speak. Now remember, I was already scared and shy and timid. And now you add being in a different country, different culture, not knowing the language, it just made everything 10 times worse. And when I'd go to school, especially my first few months, I would just, go and sit right next to the teacher. She had a special seat for me, and I would just sit and look at the ground, literally look at the ground the whole time, try not to make any eye contact with anyone. And I would just be thinking in my mind, please don't call on me. I don't want to participate. I don't know what to say. And after about 3 to 4 months, I still remember this Monday morning. I show up to class early and I sit down next to the teacher, and she walks up to me and she usually would greet me. She had learned a few words in Spanish to try to make me feel a little more comfortable. And that day she got up and she greeted me and she said, hola Cesar. And I was like, hello teacher. I learned that at least. And then she says, Cesar, today, hoy, I want you to, quiero tu contar historia. I want you to tell a story in front of the class. And I acted like I didn't understand. I was like, what? I no entiendo. But I did know what she was asking me, because every Monday she would usually call on 3 or 4 kids, girls in the class to get up in front of everybody and tell a short little story about something they had done the previous week or the previous month. I guess it was her way of, getting the kids to speak in public. And she was asking me to do that, but I acted like I didn't understand. And she got up and she left. And I thought to myself, okay, I dodged a bullet. And she started calling the kids to get up. And usually she would call 3 or 4. So she was by like the third kid was up there telling his story. And I was thinking, okay, she's not going to call on me. Until all of a sudden I hear, Cesar, it's your turn. Tu turno. And I get up. And this is what I remember. My knees were shaking. My hands, my palms were sweaty. My heart was racing 1,000 miles per hour. And when I finally get up in front of my class and I look at all my classmates, my little classmates, about 30 of them, my mind just went blank. And all I could say was, which is what we usually do when we have no idea what to say, right? And after a few seconds of that, I remembered a little story. And I just started telling that story to the best of my abilities that I had at that time. I didn't have a lot of words or anything. I just kind of Tarzan and just try to tell a story. And I felt like I was up there for a while, probably was up there for 30 seconds. And after I finished, I just went back to my seat and I just looked at the ground. I didn't want to make eye contact with anybody. And I was thinking in my mind, Cesar, oh, you did such a horrible job. Your story, oh, no one understood it. It wasn't a good story. That's what I was thinking. And after a few seconds of being so negative with myself, I finally looked up. And to my surprise, as I look at all my classmates, they were all looking back at me. All 30 of them were looking back at me. And they all had their thumbs up. They were all giving me a thumbs up. Like saying, good job. You did great. And that moment, for me, was a before and after moment. That moment changed everything for me. Mainly because it was the first time that I can remember, in those first 7-8 years of my life, it's the first time I remember that I felt the connecting power of telling a story. I felt what a story could do to others as they listened to it. And it felt so good. It was so amazing that every Monday when I'd get to class, I'd be the first one to raise my hand. I wanted to share stories. And I got better at it. Obviously, as I told more stories and, learned more English, I got better and better and better until the point where I was, 11, 12, and I was competing in storytelling competitions. And then I won the regional storytelling competition and was invited to, storytelling festivals and got the chance as a 12-year-old to tell stories in front of thousands of people. All because I was willing to get up that day and tell a story in front of my classmates. And that is the personal reason of why I do what I do and why I think you need to learn storytelling. Because stories are powerful. Because stories connect. Stories reach people's heart differently. And I don't want anyone to feel what I felt before I told my story. That fear and just that panic. I want everyone to tell their stories because I think everyone has great stories to tell. And if you're a business leader, business professional, entrepreneur, I think you have wonderful stories that can inspire, that can connect, that can engage others. That is the personal reason. The more, we'll call it professional business answer to the question of why is simply because, my last 10 years, this is what I've done. I've trained business leaders, CEOs, C-suite leaders, big-time entrepreneurs, speakers. I've trained them in how to communicate like pros by using stories. And one thing that I've learned as I train more and more business leaders and professionals is that there's really no more powerful communication skill than storytelling. And actually, this is to confirm a little bit more, give you a little bit more evidence. In 2016, there was a study done by Harvard, and it came out in the Harvard Business Review. They had interviewed and evaluated more than 1,000 business leaders from different industries, different company size, even different countries. And what they were trying to determine in the study is, how important was communication. And we always hear, different studies and things that, says that communication is the most important skill. And they wanted to kind of evaluate how much time do leaders really spend in their day-to-day communicating. Because if we're saying it's the most important skill, it must mean that, we use it a lot. And what they found is that from certain positions, and especially as you go higher up in the corporate ladder, in a company, communication becomes more and more important, to the point where about 70 to 80% of your time is spent communicating. They found this, that for most leaders in an organization, 70 to 80% of their time is spent communicating. And when I say communicating, I meant public speaking, because you're giving presentations or you're doing training or something for your team. Small group communication, which is when you're working more with a small group. Interpersonal communication, which is more one-on-one, and even digital communication, whether that be through emails or text. But 70 to 80% is communication. Think about that, and think that if I told you that, if I gave you a description of your responsibilities, and I said, okay, 70 to 80% of your time you're gonna use it communicating. I mean, I would think that you'd probably say, I got to get really good at this, because it's 70 to 80% of what I'm doing. The alarming stat is that despite the fact that 70 to 80% of your time is used communicating, they also found that less than 10% of the leaders were what we call effective communicators. Less than 10% of all the leaders that they interviewed and they evaluated, less than 10% were really effective communicators. And when they talked about effective communication, and write this down because this will help you as well. There's 3 characteristics that they were evaluating that are considered characteristics of effective communicators. One is simplicity. Are they simple communicators? Do they use simple language, simple examples? Not so much of the technical jargon and academic. Like, are you simple when you communicate? That was the first thing they were evaluating. Second is clarity. Clarity meant, is there clarity in regards to the objective you have when you're communicating, the idea that you want to communicate, which is a big deal. Like, a lot of my clients, they struggle with that. They want to communicate things, but there's no clarity into what they want to communicate. There's no main idea. There's no main lesson. The objectives. A lot of times we get confused, and then we just start communicating, and that's where we go. We go everywhere like a tree instead of leading people somewhere with our communication. And the third characteristic, which is actually the one where most people scored the lowest, is what they called relevance. Relevance. And by relevance, they meant if we make our communication meaningful and purposeful for the audience. The interesting thing is that the first 2 characteristics, simplicity, clarity, even though a lot of people didn't score very high, they scored higher. These were like the best 2. Because think about it, like, this is what you learn usually when you're in college, or even, in the business world. Usually you're more trained in how to organize your communication and be more clear about that. And sometimes we struggle a lot with simplicity, but at least you try hard to not use so much technical jargon and things of that nature. But relevance is the hardest, because relevance, since it's meaningful and purposeful, it has to do with how you make people feel. Because what's meaningful and purposeful to me and to any human depends on how they feel about what you're saying. And when we're talking about feelings, we're talking about emotions. And for most people, and I say this based on experience because I train these leaders, for most of the leaders that I work with, they've never, maybe they've heard at some point, like, you have to be inspiring and motivating, and you have to engage, and you have to create emotion, but they've never been taught how to do that. They've never been taught how to do that. So one of the reasons why I'm sharing this with you is because when it comes to being an effective communicator, and remember, 70 to 80% of your time is used in communication. So you got to be an effective communicator. When it comes to being an effective communicator, being simple, being clear, being relevant, there is no more powerful tool to do that than telling stories. Stories are, in essence, the most powerful emotional communication tool we have. And not only are they emotional, not only do we create relevance and importance and emotions through the stories we tell, but also stories help us be simple and be clear. So when we talk about being an effective communicator and we use these three characteristics, we're really talking about being an effective storyteller. And that is why I believe you, as a leader, as a business professional, as an entrepreneur, you need to learn storytelling. Because if you use 70 to 80% of your time communicating, you have to be good at it. You have to make sure that you become really elite and really professional so you can have more influence and more impact and achieve better results. So I'm gonna leave you with an invitation. Actually, two invitations for this first ever episode, okay? The first invitation is very simple. Subscribe. So when new episodes come out, we're thinking about releasing episodes every week or every 2 weeks. But when a new episode comes out, you can get notified and you can start listening to the other episodes that will be coming out. I promise you, each one of these episodes is going to be coming out. They're going to add value to you. We're going to be sharing tools and techniques and secrets and applications of strategic storytelling and public speaking for you. So that's the first invitation. Subscribe to the podcast so you can be up to date on all the future episodes. But second, and this to me is extremely important so you can really, really, really use all these other episodes that will be coming out, commit right now, commit today to becoming a better communicator. Like, have it in your mind, visualize it at least, and be like, I want to be a great communicator. I want to be, those type of communicators or public speakers that when they talk, people connect, people engage, things happen. I'm able to move the needle with my communication. But if you commit to it, at least you make the decision to want to be better, I promise you that each one of the episodes that comes out afterwards, you're going to be able to just use them a lot more. You're going to be able to take advantage of this content because you've made the decision that you want to be better at it. So those are the two invitations that I want to leave with you today. Subscribe so you can listen to the, following episodes as they come out, and commit to being the best possible communicator you can be. Because the success of your projects, the success of your company, of your business, of your teams depends and relies on your ability to communicate. Thank you very much for spending these minutes with me, for being part of the first ever episode of this podcast. And I hope you continue to connect, continue to listen to the future podcasts, because in every single one of these future podcasts, the Strategic Storytelling Podcast, there's one thing I can guarantee is that I will do all that's in my power to help you to communicate like a pro by leveraging the power of stories. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next episode. Bye-bye.